of the Greater Grand Rapids NAACP. We are excited to be here tonight, just to have this opportunity to discuss the recent occurrences, specifically involving the Grand Rapids Police Department and just police community relations in general. And so I'm excited to be here with my guys tonight. Deroo, who's the Executive Director of Linc, and Adnoris Giovanni Bo, who's the Executive Director of the West Michigan Hispanic Center, and then Kareem Scales, who's the incoming Youth Council advisor for the Greater Grand Rapids NAACP Youth Council. And so it is critically important that we have this conversation tonight to not only talk about the recent occurrences, right, that has happened over the last, I think, 2 weeks, and then we have another occurrence that's happened over, I believe, the last 24 hours involving the Grand Rapids Police Department and their interaction with our citizens. And so we are here to, one of the things, to underscore the importance of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights hearings and listening sessions that is actually taking place on this Thursday. Now, there are two sessions. The first one is from 1 to 4 p.m., and then the second session is from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the NAACP Center for Community Transformation, which is located at 1530 Madison Avenue Southeast. So the importance of this session is that this has never been done before. It brings to this community statewide attention on the potential police harassment and brutality that has taken place not only just recently, but historically, and many of you know, for a number of years, involving communities of color. And also, I don't want to be remiss, because I think some of the things and challenges that we've had with respect to local law enforcement involves poor white communities as well. So there's a socioeconomic perspective that we have to recognize in this. And so one of the things we want to talk about tonight is the importance of this hearing being held in the great city of Grand Rapids, Michigan, in the county of Kent, and the importance of people getting out and allowing their voices to be heard. And I know there is a distinct focus on the Grand Rapids Police Department, but I have been having conversations with a number of people. This is an issue with law enforcement across the board, right? And so we are inviting everyone out to tell their stories and to share their stories. So the point of this is for the commission or the Department of Civil Rights to listen, and literally, it really is a listening session to gather the information and concerns of the residents in this city, and then to make a determination on how they move forward with a full-fledged state-ordered investigation into the Grand Rapids Police Department. And so with that, I want to ask Jeremy Deroo to just kind of introduce yourself, and then we'll go down the line, and then we can kind of just flow from there. And one of the things I want to say, I was telling the guys earlier that I said we feel like we're a little uptight in here, right? So we know that this is a serious conversation, right? But we want to. I hope that we can be real tonight, in that we can be honest and we can speak truth to power. And let's just flow with it. I don't think any of us really have scripts. Jeremy and I have been in this work for a long time, and authoring the 13-point plan, which eventually morphed into a 12-point plan. And so, and that we're doing that work with the Micah Center and the Urban League. And so we have been engaged in this work for quite a time, for quite some time, I should say. And so let's just relax. Let's encourage people to get out. Let's encourage people to allow their voices to be amplified, and then we'll flow from there. So, Jeremy?
So I'm Jeremy Deroo, Executive Director of Linc Up. Yeah, and I think tomorrow's events, the Civil Rights Department of Civil Rights is hosting two listening sessions in Grand Rapids. And I know for many people, you hear listening sessions and you may think, what's the point of more listening? We've spoken so often about these issues. We've talked about this so much. We need more than just listening. We need to do something. But this is my understanding. This is the first time the Department of Civil Rights has ever heard or started this process and gotten this far into the process of going into investigation of a police department in the state of Michigan. So this is not a small thing that's happening tomorrow. This is really a big deal, and their process starts with listening. And it is important that we get out there and share stories, because the laws that allow them to operate require them to hear in a listening session what is going on. They can't rely on information that's coming from third sources. They can't look at other reports that have already been published. They can't take the statements and the many people that have come out to City Commission and talked about problems and incorporate that into their investigation. They need to come out and in their listening sessions hear from the community what's really happening there. And so tomorrow's a big deal that the State Civil Rights Department, this is a department that investigated the water crisis in Flint and issued a huge report identifying structural racism as a cause of that problem. It's that same process that we're in right now. This is the start of the Flint water crisis, is where they are with Grand Rapids Police Department, saying, is this a big deal? Is this structural racism going on in Grand Rapids? And if you think it is, if you think that there's issues that we need to address, tomorrow's a chance that we need to be out and talking about it. And we need to share stories there about interactions with the police that you think are discriminatory. The reality is we need to share all the stories that have happened so that they can get a sense of the totality of what we're dealing with. Old stories, new stories, they all matter for their process. I think the particular stories that have happened within 6 months have more legal standing for them. So more recent examples are really important for them to hear, because that gives them legal groundwork to start the investigation. But older stories are also important to be told, because they paint that picture of the broad structure of what's really happening here.
And so my brother Jeremy keeps saying tomorrow. I know he's very excited.
Yeah, it's been a long week.
But it's been a long week, right? It feels
Thursday,
feels like tomorrow. It's Thursday.
Thank you.
But one of the things I do want to say in mentioning, because I was kind of making some notes here, I believe that, and I'm sure the public will be hearing at tomorrow at 12 o'clock at King Park. It's my understanding that there is a group of individuals who's doing a rally. So 12 o'clock tomorrow at King Park is kind of the precursor to Thursday. So stay tuned to that as well. Brother Bo.
So the Bo is for Boricua. Adnoris Torres, new Executive Director for the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan. The narrative that's been told for the Latino community has not been told by the Latino community. And when we have incidents like what happened with Gilmar Gomez, it affects all communities. And when we allow people to tell our narrative, that takes away from the power of the community. So
That's
communities
right.
of color, when you have, vulnerable communities historically, we see what happens when we don't tell our stories, when we don't share our narratives. And Black and brown communities here in Grand Rapids under a lot of strain and stress generationally. So coming into this community, I didn't expect for my first 2 years to be the 2 years that I've had when it comes to this conversation. Coming from Detroit, spending 15 years there, doing a lot of community work, working with students. Anecdotally, I think that we were talking, Jeremy and I, and I'm 5'5" on a good day. And being able to de-escalate situations with students that were a lot bigger, right? Being able to talk, being able to have conversations with students, and having just, words as the power that I had, but it's that engagement. And I think that's what's missing. But I think being able to have a conversation like we will on Thursday, and being able to really share those stories and see where those deficits are, what are the gaps in those areas that we want community policing. We don't want law enforcement. And I think when we think about policing, it's different than what's happening lately.
So, Bo, it's interesting. So talk a little bit about the intersect between the Black and brown communities, and why is it so important for the Hispanic Center in the Latino community to be involved in these issues. I personally know, but the folks who are watching, other folks in the audience may not understand the disparities with respect not only to law enforcement, but healthcare, economics, education that are really close, that impact communities of color across the board. It's also my understanding that the 2 young men who were stopped are Latino. So explain or kind of speak to why it's important for not only the black community to come out, but the brown community to come out as well.
Yeah, and I know that there are very specific barriers to the Latino population right now.
Yeah.
Because the narrative has been such that, we've been played to be, in the words of our current president, murderers and rapists, right? That's been the narrative that's been told about the community. Kareem and I actually grew up together in Battle Creek. So when we moved from Puerto Rico to Battle Creek, we lived in the same neighborhood. I was that kid that was walking down Rittenhouse Avenue in the middle of the street because there was ice or there was snow or there were things going on, walking to Wilson Elementary School. So I was that young person. And now to be in a place where we're having this conversation, what if I would have been put in that situation, right? That's why I think the hashtag, would you pull a gun on me, is really looking at what can happen if a child or a youth were to react out of fear and do something that the police officer didn't think was proper, right? That's why I think the conversation is so important. After the second generation, we see a lot of the disparities across the board, whether it be black or Latino in our communities. We see the infant mortality rate. I had the opportunity to work with the program Strong Beginnings when I first moved here to Grand Rapids. The #1 infant mortality rate for the Latino population in the U.S. is in Michigan. Why is that? What is the structural racism, really, that causes some of these things to happen? Why are we, having these conversations over and over again to the point that we need to bring in the ACLU to have an investigation, to have these things happen, when there have been plans that have been put out before that state very specific things? When we look at education, so the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan, educate, advocate, and empower, right? When we look at education and we look at what's not happening with our teaching staff, when we look at what's not happening with our advisors, with our counseling staff, what does that representation look like? How can we have these conversations with our students? What's happening with the police force when the percentage of officers of color is not representative of the communities that they're policing? So looking at those things and saying, what are the systems that are in place that are keeping all of these things from happening, and then what are the outcomes? I mean, the infant mortality rate, I never expected that. When I read that, I was working in that area. So it elevated the conversation even more for me when it comes to fatherhood, when it comes to representation, when it comes to what's actually happening. So it's just extremely important to really tell our story and to have the narrative to really back that up as to what is happening from our own voices.
Right. And it's interesting, even from an infantile perspective, I know a number of years ago, and it probably is the same in terms of the stat, and many people probably don't even know this, but Kalamazoo County and Kent County was the second and highest, it had the second and highest, the first and second highest infant mortality rate in the state of Michigan.
Yes, sir. And even as high as our population's infant mortality is, the African American infant mortality is still higher.
Exactly.
So we have to look at that. What are those gaps? What is really going on with regards to our families, our parents? So,
okay, Mr. Kareem Scales on the mic.
Good evening, everyone. So Kareem Scales, Manager of Innovation and Technology at the NAACP, also incoming youth advisor with the local branch. Just want to say it's a pleasure to be here amongst these individuals here, and this is something that's overdue. We all need to get out and share our stories. I look forward to bringing an interesting perspective to the table. Like Bo said, I'm come from these communities, still heavily involved and have family and friends in these communities. I myself have been in the position of those young gentlemen and been held at gunpoint for unnecessary things. So I look forward to being able to encourage the community to come out and speak. I think that if they see someone who they've seen in those shoes, it can inspire them to feel comfortable and come out and share their stories. So that's primarily my role here, and to encourage everyone to come out Thursday. Like they said, there's 2 sessions. One is 1 to 4, and the second session is 5:30 to 8:30. And let's have an honest discussion. I think a lot of times when we touch on these issues, we want to be so vague and protect the powers that be. I think it's time for us to have a genuine discussion and call it for what it is. And that's who I am as an individual. That's what I look forward to bringing to the table with the NAACP and in this community. So with that said, I think we should maybe get into maybe one of the videos, if we can get there, and start to have some dialogue around that. I have a few comments here as well.
Where there's a sidewalk right here. Can you just stick your hands in your pocket for me real quick? You too.
So this is the
Take both
video
your hands
of
out of your pocket.
the 2 young gentlemen that
Stop right there.
were held at
You're not free to leave.
gunpoint
I'm
recently.
stopping you, okay? Take your hands out of your pocket. Okay? Let's step up on the sidewalk. I'm not going to talk to you in the middle of the street, okay? For walking in the street where there's a sidewalk provided, I just told you that. You guys got your IDs on you? Stop, dude. I'm not playing games. Okay, now that we're on the sidewalk, we're gonna talk. Okay, I'm stopping you because you're walking the street where there's a sidewalk provided. Okay, that gives me a reason to stop and talk to you. Okay.
Last contact with Michael.
And it gives me a reason to stop and ask for your ID too. So I'm gonna get your guys' ID real quick.
I think we got a message via
Well, what's your name?
from NDOC. Heather.
Take your hands out of your pockets. I'm not gonna ask you that. Take your hands out of your. I'm not playing games. Keep your hands out of your pockets. Because I asked you to. Take your hands out of your pocket, please. What's your first name? This can go real smooth if you just cooperate with me a second. Okay, but I decided to get out and talk to you. Okay? So what's your name? What's your name? Are you going to give me your name? Just explain that to you. I'll explain it one more time. I'll take one more now.
Yeah, the 600 block.
What's your first name? How old are you? How old are you? Just turn around, put your hands on top of your head. Okay. Put your hands on top of your head. Yeah, you are. Okay, then you're gonna tell me your name. Okay, what's your middle name? What's your last name? I just told you that you're committing a crime. It's a crime to walk in the middle of the street where there's a sidewalk provided in the city of Grand Rapids. Okay? I don't know how many more times that needs to be explained to you before you understand why I stopped and talked to you. Okay? Because you're violating a crime, that gives me the right to ask for your name. Because that's a crime in the city of Grand Rapids to walk in the street where there's a sidewalk provided. Yeah. Yeah. You were walking all the way from Clyde Park. I do. Yeah, look at this sidewalk right here. What's your last name? What's your date of birth? So what's your age? That makes you how old? What's up here? Where do you stay at? What's your address? What's your name? How do you spell that? What's your middle name? What's your last name?
Have your name.
What's your last name? How many times do I have to explain this to you? I don't get it.
You just told us to get on the sidewalk every day.
No, that's not what I have to do. I'm gonna get your name.
So if he tells you his name, you gonna leave us alone?
Yeah, I'm gonna file check you, make sure you got no warrants or anything, and get you on your way.
Youngest, bro.
I don't know how old you are.
Sir, we youngest. Like, we just.
What's your last name? How do you spell that? No, you don't. No, you don't. You're staying right here. Put your hands on top of your head.
Hey, man, chill out, bro. Chill out, bro.
Put your hands on top of your head.
Hey, chill out. Chill out, do what you
Come on,
doing.
Forky, step it up. Put your hands on top of your head.
Bro,
You're under arrest.
Hey, move. Chill out. He didn't do nothing,
You're
bro.
under arrest.
He didn't do nothing, bro. What the hell you doing?
Stop.
Bro, he didn't do nothing, bro. What are you? Hey, he didn't swing at
Put
you.
your
He didn't do
show me
nothing.
your hands.
Hey,
Get on the ground.
chill out. Chill out.
Get on the ground.
Chill out, bro.
Put your hands on top of your head.
Focus, bro. Focus.
Put your hands on top of your head.
You see this,
You're under
bro?
arrest.
You see this shit? Yeah, bro.
You're
What
under
the fuck,
arrest.
bro? What?
Put your hands on top of your head.
What did we do? We didn't do nothing.
Doug, he keeps reaching for his waistband. Put your hands on top of your head.
But for what?
You're under arrest.
Get down the ground.
You're under arrest. Get on the ground. He keeps reaching for his waistband.
Get down the ground. Put your hands down.
Lay down on the ground. Get on the ground. Lay on the ground.
Are you serious?
He's under arrest for failed to ID. When I went hands on, he keeps reaching for his waistband. Keep your hands on top of your head. No, you're under arrest. I told you that.
Just relax, man. Just listen to commands. We're gonna be good to go. Okay?
Y'all deep as hell for what?
I'm gonna tell them up real quick. You wanna go lethal? No, I want you to put your hands behind your back real quick for me, okay?
You gonna cut me?
Yep, real quick, okay? Based on you guys' cooperation and lack thereof. You understand you're being detained right now, okay? It doesn't mean you're going to jail or anything, but you guys are being uncooperative, reaching in your pockets and trying to pull away from me while I'm trying to take you into custody.
Unit status check on Linc.
You understand that?
So at one point, one of the young guys says, "Do you see what the sidewalk looks like?" And living on the west side, knowing what this winter was like and knowing what the sidewalks look like, I can empathize with them. And I can say, you know, they were walking in the middle of the street. Okay, as young men, please go to the sidewalk. They went to the sidewalk. The follow-up behind that, though, the questioning. Why go to that extreme and why go to that extent? When we can say, thank you, gentlemen, let's walk on the sidewalk, it's not safe for you, something to that effect. But when we escalate it in the questioning, there is a response that's going to happen. Well, why? When we're talking to young people, it's okay to ask why. It's an ordinance. It's a law. Okay, fine. Can we go now? Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great day. The escalation of to that effect with young people, instead of having a conversation, instead of conversing, we may say, you know, well, what happened to respect, or what happened to listening to your elders? Generationally, we have to be able to engage and engage in a way that's going to be productive for them. This is our future. So if we're having conversations that are from our perspective, we're not taking their voice into account. So what are we actually modeling for them? That's what I see in something like this.
You know, I want to read this quote and get and refer folks to Dr. Joy Angela DeGrise. She's done a lot of work around post-traumatic slave syndrome, and I think it kind of puts it in context. And the quote is, what if someone severely injured you and you could not receive the medical attention to properly heal and recover because the person that injured you kept injuring you, right? Every time you made a little progress, not to mention each time they re-injured you, you would scream with pain and protest while they blame you for your pain and lack of being able to recover. Then they tell you to remain calm, right? In this situation, suck it up and don't play the race card. Well, welcome to the daily world, black people. And I would even modify this quote to say, welcome to the daily world of black people and brown people who are descendants of slavery in America. So I get it, and I'm looking at the comment. There was one comment about it's not about race. Well, hell yeah, it is about race, fundamentally. But we also know that we have to graduate the conversation above race, because it talked about respect, but it's even bigger than respect. It's about righteousness. It's about righteousness. But we also know that race plays a significant role in this. And I would say, and I've said this publicly, if those were two young 15, 16-year-old white males or females walking in East Grand Rapids or on a certain side of the southeast side of town, they would not have been treated that way, period. The officer was totally out of control. I mean, hell, let's be honest. So the neurological function of teens, you know, you neurologically do not develop until you're about 24 years of age. That is scientifically proven. So we know that teens will talk back. There is a immaturity level. There's a defiance level. And so as adults, and as especially trained professionals, we should know how to deal with those situations. They followed his commands. When he said, he pulled up to them and said, would you get out of the street? You're breaking the law. Proceed to the sidewalk. They proceeded to the sidewalk. It should have been over. It should have been done at that point. He continually at that point to escalate the situation. Remember, he's a trained professional in de-escalation tactics. And so one of the things that, in looking at this situation at the NAACP, we have to be mindful that the Grand Rapids Police Department has what they call a youth interaction policy. He totally violated the youth interaction policy, which we'll be speaking to in detail on Thursday, based on his behavior. And so, you know, let's call a duck, right? It was no reason. It was no reason for him to, first of all, when he asked for ID, I don't know of any 15 or 16-year-old who really has an ID, a driver's license. They may have a school ID, but there is nothing that you can get from that, right?
They said it. We're youngins.
And they said they were youngins. They were youngins.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the interesting thing about this, let's have an honest conversation, people. You know, this is a tough ass conversation to have. I don't know if the FCC will, whatever, fine us, but this is a tough ass conversation to have. It's tiresome. It's tough. But imagine the people that have to deal with this bullshit day in and day out, that wake up and the first thing we think about every day is the color of our skin and ethnicity, and we have to navigate through this stuff. So it's hard, it's tough to deal with. It's hard to say, well, you know what, these kids were unruly, they should have complied. Well, they did comply. It was a simple civic or civil infraction.
Yeah, walking down the street.
Walking down the
like Bo
street.
said, Battle
And-
Creek.
exactly.
We grew up playing basketball in the street all day. I've never experienced anything
That's
like
what
this.
we did.
And respect goes both ways.
It goes both ways, man.
So I feel like, just a few comments. I've seen this video a few times, and every time I see this video, I get a certain feeling in my stomach, a sense of anger and sadness. Like I just said, respect goes both ways. I feel like the officer, he had the opportunity. This was an opportunity for him to build a relationship with these youth, and he made the decision to do the opposite. From the beginning of the video, the energy that he presented, it automatically is going to lead to a negative interaction. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We're all men here, and there's a certain way you have to speak to individuals if you want an expected outcome. Like I said, I come directly from these communities. When I watch this video and I see these young boys walking down the street, it's obvious to me they don't have a gun, okay? Anybody who has a gun and come in contact with the police, they're going to run. No one is going to engage in a conversation with police officers with a firearm on them. And what are the statistics around that? So, I don't know. And then just to piggyback off of later in the video where they say he's reaching for your waistband. I didn't see that part in the video. I think he was waiting for the opportunity to pull his firearm out. This is a cold day. They obviously keep putting their hands in their pockets, but it's clear to me these youth did not have a firearm. At any point, I didn't see the officer's life in danger or being threatened. This is all an excuse, and what we've heard from the chief of police is that what we've always heard in these situations, the officer has followed proper protocol. At what point do we start to question protocol and make changes to do what's right?
One of the concerning things about the police reaction to this is the interim chief did not just say he followed protocol. He said, this is a great example of what I expect my police officers to do.
He did.
That is well beyond saying this was acceptable. He was saying this is what we want people to do. I don't understand how a police department that is, on the one hand, will respond to situations like this saying it's our highest priority to increase trust with the community. They can then justify saying this is what we train officers to do. I mean, it explains why officers act this way. If this is what good policing looks like to the chief of the police, but this is anybody who watches that video. This is anything but good policing. I mean, the police officer was the least respectful person on the scene.
For sure.
Right? Like he approached with hostility. The police officer was the most violent person on the scene. That's not good policing.
And it speaks to the need of diversity on the force. I have a young man, mentee, former student, Antoine Hill, who was a Detroit police officer who grew up in Southwest Detroit, who polices Southwest Detroit. The interactions that he has, he's documented. And it's completely opposite from what happened here. Hey, let me talk to you. Hey, talking about playing ball in the street. Making sure that he's engaging and interacting, making sure that he's stopping. There was a great video that he posted on Facebook having a snowball fight with a group of kids that were having a snowball fight in the middle of the street.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So that's the kind of interaction, and those are the kind of things that we should be thinking about when we're having interactions like this. Hey, fellas, let me talk to you. I know it's cold. There might be ice, but I need you out the street.
Right.
And it just, what's the cadence? How are you going to interact? And Cle, the greatest point is having that opportunity to really engage.
So one of the things I want to mention too is one of my trustees. I'm laughing at somebody talked about on one of the comments about the FCC. No FCC concern. So I'm old school. I always have to check, and so just make sure I'm in order and protocol. Because people are always looking for something. But so African Americans account for 16% of all young people, right? Although they make up 28% of juvenile arrests. African American juveniles are more likely to be sentenced to prison under the age of 18, and 58% of African Americans with juvenile status are sentenced to adult prisons. And so that's a problem. That is a problem. In this instance, one of the young guys, he was actually taken to juvenile, and then eventually the other young man was released to his parents. And so, again, it's a situation where it was totally out of control. It was totally preventable, and we have to do better. We honestly have to do better. We have to have tough conversations. Conversations that oftentimes drain us. Those of us who are out here on the ground day in and day out, we know the drain. We really, really know the drain. And so what do we do? How do we move forward? You know, there have been many calls to our organization. I'm sure all of our organizations have received many calls saying, well, this is just another conversation. What happens? So how do we move forward? What are we hoping for out of this, the hearings on Thursday? And what is the responsibility of just the average day citizen that is, I oftentimes will say that's sitting on the sidelines, right? And that's or Facebooking or social media politicking, and not willing to take the risks that is necessary to see real systemic change.
Right.
So
I think one of the things we do is what we've done here today. We come together as a community. We come together with our organizations, and it's time to share those stories. So I think that's the first step, and I feel like we're going in the right direction, but it's a long walk, and there's a lot of work to be done.
Okay. So is there a need? And I'm happy again. I'm going to be transparent because personally, I'm tired of conversation as well. So a lot of conversation has been had, and people have been sending me stuff about it's time to turn up the heat. And so, what does that turning up the heat look like? And so that's a real question. Is we are tired of going to freaking city council meetings, and honestly, I take my hats off to the citizens in Grand Rapids who have been really trying and making a strong effort. Jeremy, you know, in improving those community police relationships, and I think all of our organizations have been holding our constituents at bay to say, don't turn the heat up, right? But what does really turning the heat up look like? You know, I mean, because that's a real conversation that has to be had. And from my perspective, there's risk involved with turning the heat up, being jailed, and a lot of other things in terms of forcing this system, forcing change on this system that has been essentially abusive. And honestly, when I look at the terminology of molestation, that has been molesting our kids. And it's time to cut it out. It's time to stop it. And so, you guys think?
I mean, I definitely.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, right? Like, I've seen 200 people come out to city commission meeting and demand change, and then 3 months later had a conversation with the police chief saying, well, if you just tell us what you think we should be doing, right? The community has done their part, to your point. Like, community has articulated what can be done about the problem. The challenge is making something happen from it. I do think that one of the challenges is that right now the police determination of good police behavior is judged by the police department.
Right.
They always investigate themselves and find themselves innocent, right? Like that's always how it happens. And I think, again, I don't want to put too much hope in any one solution, but I think Thursday with a state agency here to be able to have the power to say it's our decision now, right? I think that's a different conversation we get to have in Grand Rapids than before, where we've always had to defer to the police department as the ultimate authority in the situation. So I think that I don't know if that is it's definitely not a short-term solution, right? The downside of state agencies is they have process procedures to follow, and it's not going to make a solution or a change next week. But I think it is creating a going to a different power source, at least that can start to have some influence outside of just the police union and police department. So I think that's part of the solution and it's part of the strategy to kind of make change here locally. But I do think that, again, if you go back to, it was what, 2014 when the 13-point plan was presented to commission first, right? Yeah, that was 6 weeks to get body cams on every officer in the city of Grand Rapids, right? But that was 200 people coming out every week over the holiday season. Every other week, I guess it was the city commission meetings, but yeah, I mean, showing up does make a difference, but it has to be consistent. And right, and the challenge with it is, the system will always try to wait out the community, right? Because the community, to get 200 people to come every time is so much work on the part of the community.
Yes, it is.
And to keep up that level of heat is extremely difficult, where the union can just stall for 6 months and hope that it goes away. And I think the community, again, should be applauded because it has been diligent over a long period of time to push for change consistently.
Yeah, and I think the critical point here is that I was talking to some folks across the state, and they said, Cle, the critical point is that now the entire state is watching what will happen in Grand Rapids, and we have to remember Kent County, because oftentimes the county will fly under the radar, but we need the county to step up as well and to provide some resources to addressing this issue across the county. And so it's not just about the city, but it's about the county. And some people will probably call me tomorrow about that, but I don't give a damn. And so I'm actually being very tapered. And so it is about the county as well. All of these commissioners and the county administrator as well. And so now with this piece, we have a state agency that has investigatory powers and subpoena powers to really, if they decide to dive deep into this situation, and it is systemic and it has been historical here in the city of Grand Rapids. This shit it just didn't happen, last week.
And not just in Grand Rapids, it's going on everywhere.
It's going on everywhere. You think about Kentwood, you think about Wyoming, you think about Granville, you think about the state police. It's happening across the board. And I encourage citizens to come out, because this is an interesting thing. For me personally, I'm in a very unique situation. And so people will often say, well, what is the NAACP doing, right? We take complaints on a daily basis across the board, not just, law enforcement, education, housing, employment, all across the board. Disability across the board. But people don't want their stories told. They just want this stuff to go away. They don't want it to. They just want it to go away.
But that's the beauty or the ugliness of the whole structure, right? The only way for the system to change is when the victims of oppression stand up to the oppressor and take the entire burden to change the system is put on the people who are most suffering from it. Right, and that's the challenge. Like you have to experience that, and then you are expected to go up and lead the charge against that oppressive structure while you're working through your own issues and shit that you have to deal with because they fucked you up.
And
I got Jeremy cursing now.
no activist struggle has ever been done by itself.
Yeah.
And it's speaking to those reports and those things that come in on the daily, right? When you're talking justice, right? Moral soundness and conformity to truth. If we're really talking about justice, one of the things that I saw over the last couple of years here was when Tavion and the Youth Council spoke up for what was happening at the border with Latino youth. To be able to show up for each other. Showing up is one of the strongest things that we can do.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about really making change and going against that systemic, structural piece, that activism, the working together between different organizations, race, origin, newcomer, that's where the strength is. When Movimiento Cosecha does a march, that activist piece on May 1st, that day without an immigrant that they do yearly, we should all be showing up to that.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Because that is where we actually see power. When you see a group of people all coming together from different groups. I mean, we were just at the gala for the Hispanic Chamber. When you look at what the economics of diversity bring, of diversity of thought, we know that. We know the
Right.
numbers. We know the reality of that. So it's speaking to that and saying, what are you going to do to make sure that we're being honest, that we're being careful, that we're being equitable towards youth, towards race, towards age? What are we really doing to make those things happen? And I do have to say, activism drove action. When it comes to the actions of Kent County, going up to a county level, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The actions that the sheriff took, I think that she has to be, you know, we have to give some kind of credit, because she did listen to the activism and she did act on it. But if it wasn't for the activist voices that came to the table and said, these are the things that are occurring, this is why this is not okay, that probably wouldn't have happened if people would have just stayed quiet. So that's the power in the narrative. When we're talking about real change across the board, it will be those activist voices that will make those changes happen.
I think also, to piggyback off of what Bo just said, it comes from the top of their organizational structure. So the new chief of police, when our city manager chooses who's going to be the new chief of police, it has to be someone who is going to set the example for the city and for the rest of the force. And we haven't seen that. And I feel that that's a big part in why we've continued to experience this stuff as well. So we need to put pressure on that. There's going to be more meetings with the community. I've showed up to a few of them, and there's maybe 50 people in the room. So we need to put pressure on that. Our new chief of police needs to be someone who has these same views, who understands there's a problem, and they're willing to step outside the box and do what's right.
Yeah, so one of the things I want to do is just take a commercial break and recognize the partners, the community partners, of course, those of us who are on the panel tonight, the Hispanic Center of West Michigan, the Linc Up, the ACLU, the Immigration Rights Center,
Michigan Immigration Rights Center.
Michigan Immigration Rights Center, the Pride Center. We have all come together to unite a collaborative force to address this issue on many levels, and so wanted to just give a shout out to them as well. And so
I think we should also get into some of these comments out of respect for our viewers. Maybe read some of the comments and have some commentary around that.
So, one of the things that I will say is that one of the comments is about moving in the right direction, and one of the viewers has said, they actually don't agree. I think, respectfully, I think we have made steps to move in the right direction. And so it doesn't look pretty, it's not perfect, but we've made steps to move in the right direction. And so one of the things that I highlight for people based on the 12-point plan, and I will say this time and time again, that Linc authored, co-authored the Grand Rapids Urban League and the NAACP. The city will lead you to believe that that was voluntarily done, but it was not. And but one of the things that came out of that plan was the traffic stop study, the 2013-2016 traffic stop study that showed a disparate impact on motorists of color in the city of Grand Rapids. And another thing that came out of that, which is critical, is body cameras. And some people will say, well, you got body cameras and they're still doing this stuff, right? But that is a digital documentation of the bullshit that has been happening. Mm-hmm. And now we see it, and they cannot deny it.
It's changed the conversation, at least, right? Which is slow progress, right? And back to, I want to kind of address too. Like, I agree that talking's not enough, right? It's not going to change things, but and body cameras, right? Some people say, well, they have body cameras and this same stuff's still happening, so they weren't worth it. What the body cameras have at least done is change the conversation. So now we can have conversation about what are the right policies, and just saying, instead of just saying this isn't happening, yes it is, and the conversation dies there, right? But so that's a slow process of change, but that is where we are in that system, right? The stuff isn't going to go away overnight, and just talking about it isn't going to change it either. I think that there are opportunities right now to put pressure on things that are happening, right? Right now, the City of Grand Rapids is negotiating a new contract with the police union.
Yeah.
That's going on right now, right? And there is, right, the current contract has a policy where after 2 years, if a police officer does something wrong, they get some sort of reprimand for it. It goes in their file for 2 years, and then they can request, and it goes away, and it's like it never happened, right? So the issue that happened in November with Captain Vanderkoy reporting the Marine to ICE, that is not the first time that this officer is facing disciplinary actions for inappropriate racial comments, for racial profiling connectivity. He's been sued by individuals before for misconduct, but when when they subpoenaed his personnel file, there's nothing in there.
Yeah.
Right? Which means that when a person is up for promotion in the police department, there is nothing about this history that they are legally allowed to consider in promoting them. That's how the union contract is designed right now, and that doesn't have to be that way anymore. But that is an example of one thing we changed in next month. That's going to be going forward, and that's one thing where residents have to be speaking out to just bring attention to. If we're going to change the police department, we have to change the union.
That's right.
And if we're going to change the union, you have to change the contract.
And in what other industry, none of us have that power to do that in our jobs. I mean, if you do something, you can't go on your file and choose what to take out of your file. I've never heard of anything like that.
Yeah, it's also in the current contract that if a officer gets hired in their application process, right, and we're hiring a ton of officers right now, if you falsify a document in your application file, after 2 years, and you get caught on it, nothing happens. They can't do anything.
Which is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So there are multiple streams in terms of how we can attack this problem. And some of us who, honestly, who are not willing to take the risk to come out publicly on a visual level, we can always write a letter.
Yeah.
We can always write a note, an anonymous note. Those things help. And this is the other thing, the most important thing. We can always vote their asses out of office.
Yeah.
These are public officials. So we can vote them out of office, period. And so we got to look towards 2020. We got to look towards the local elections that are happening here. And that's the power. That is really the power. It's interesting to me that, so the hearings are Thursday. President Trump is coming in Thursday.
Same day.
Right.
And so this community needs to send a loud and clear message that this crap will not be tolerated at all on any level. And I think we have worked very diligently to help people to understand that there is a righteous way to go about getting change. And so I just hope people come out on Thursday, and if you're not able to come out, respond to all of these situations and allow not only on the local level, the state level and the federal level as well, to address this issue that's happening right here in the great city, the progressive city of Grand Rapids.
It's the best city to live in, right?
When you say progressive, that almost makes me laugh. One thing is, you're right, Grand Rapids is progressive in all industries and on all levels except for the police department. We see cranes in the sky everywhere downtown, but the same issues, and I think we've actually taken some steps back in regards to the policing in the city. And they're just not. I feel, me personally, I don't feel like they've even made any initiative to make these changes. There's no accountability on their end. Some of us have been a part of meetings with the community and the police, and like they always say, we're following protocol. There's no accountability. It's always the youth, or it's always the offender who could have done something different.
Even that language, the
yeah.
offender, not the person. Why the offender? Why are we going back to that kind of language?
It's all the.
So it's the
right.
policy piece. I mean, you can write whatever policy you want, but if it's not effective and it's not equitable, then
Right.
what does it really mean?
Exactly.
I mean, do our police officers live in the city that they police?
Yeah, exactly.
Rhetorical. I mean, do they? Is that a real question that we're asking? And we can't be apathetic. My dad used to tell me, Nori, we have 2-year amnesia. Every 2 years, it's the same thing, right? We cannot allow that. We saw what happened in the elections with apathy. We saw what happened when we were really focused on winning an election. The changes can occur. And now we're looking a year out. We're saying what can happen in 2020. Because really, we're in 2019, and these elections are right around the corner. We have to pay attention. We really have to be vocal, and we have to, that activist voice, going back to that.
Okay.
Do not let whatever is happening become a message from the past. It has to continue forward.
Yeah, that's right. So, again, the Michigan Department of Civil Rights will be hosting listening sessions and a listening session in the hearing on this coming Thursday, March 28th, at the Center for Community Transformation is where the NAACP office is. And the first session, there are 2 sessions, 1 to 4. And the second session that same day is 5:30 to 8:30. And so we strongly encourage the community to come out and to voice their concerns. And we are expecting that there will be some change
And
and some movement.
Yeah, one of the comments we want to put, we see Jamel Eddy just made a really good comment. When justice and love get together, they produce liberation and transformation. From Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III. And I think that's a great statement. That's a great quote that we need to not only quote, but we need to live in that space.
Yes, sir.
I think we may want to get into one of the other videos and see what kind of commentary we can go on about that. While we cue that up, let's read some other comments. Irvin Pratt.
Exit the vehicle. Walk out the car. Exit the vehicle. Exit the vehicle. My son is exit the vehicle. Get the fuck out of here. You got that? Let me get out. Put your hands
He just kicked him. He just kicked him.
You're gonna get tased if you don't get out. I got hands free. Taser. Get on the ground.
So get him, go.
Sit down. I want you to sit down.
He's punching him.
So what's going on here, the gentleman was pulled over. He pulled into a family member's driveway. That's one thing that's kind of well known when you come from these communities. If you're going to get pulled over, you need to pull over somewhere where somebody can at least see, just in case something happens to you. So he pulled over, I believe, into his mother's driveway. The police proceed to break the window and pull him out of the car. His 2-year-old son, I believe, was in the back seat, and the officers sprayed pepper spray in that vehicle with his 2-year-old son present. So one comment that was made, we were at a press conference with the police, and it was asked that, is it proper protocol to spray pepper spray in a vehicle with a 2-year-old present? And the chief of police said that that is the proper protocol to do that. So their excuse to everything is just proper protocol. At what point in any real world would it be, pepper spray for an adult? Even if you're in the vicinity of pepper spray, it doesn't even have to be sprayed directly on you. And it causes all sorts of things. In what world would it be appropriate to spray pepper spray in a vehicle with a 2-year-old? And then proceed to beat this man, was it 31 times he was hit?
After He had been tased. So
For
it's-
driving on, and I think it ended up he had a driving on suspended license warrant, and he was speeding.
Yeah. So again, some systemic problems that have to be addressed. There's an opportunity for the community to come out on Thursday, this Thursday, March 28th, to talk about not only the recent incidents but the systemic incidents that have happened historically here in this city, in this county. And we just encourage people to come out, share their stories, share their testimony, and then we will move forward from that point. So, yeah. So, fellas, are you guys? I know it's late.
I'm up now.
Yeah, we just
you're
getting
wide
started.
awake.
We still got 2 more videos. They're pretty short. Let's get through these other videos. Some of the community may not have seen all the videos, so let's play these. These are, I think, are more not the most recent situations. These are some situations that happened
right there
a few months back.
You on live?
No, why would I go live?
Get on the sidewalk or you going to jail. Oh my God, he beating her.
So this is the incident from last night.
This is from
I'm
last
missing
night.
it.
Yeah.
That nigga walk behind that truck, better get the fuck from behind
They
that.
finna shoot.
I should go live.
Why wouldn't you be going live? Y'all supposed to be letting the people see that. That
I'm about
could
to
be
go
y'all.
live.
So that was a situation from last night, I believe.
Yeah. It happened on Hall Street, I think, near Madison last night. The police are saying it was a man who was on the ground that was getting kicked by the officer. They announced today that they launched an internal investigation into it and will be releasing body cam footage at some point. But so far, all we know is really what's on that video there.
Yeah. So it appears that was a young lady.
Put your hands up now!
You might be at the wrong house, all right? You'll be out of touch shortly. Walk through.
All right, you're not in any trouble. Just relax.
Is this car hot or not? Anything sharp on you? I'm gonna check it real quick, okay? Nothing sharp on you. Hey, face the car for me. Hey, face the car for me. You'll be out of cuffs in no time, all right? You know somebody with the last name of Manning?
No, I do not know anyone with the last name of
Then you'll be on your own just no time, all right?
Oh, yes, sir.
It's not that big a deal to be that upset, okay? Turn and face me.
And that statement right there. It's not that big of a deal to be that upset. It speaks back to Dr. DeGroo's statement.
Spread your feet out for me.
It's not the fact that you believe it to be okay. It's the fact that it's not okay to put handcuffs on a youth like that when you're able to have a conversation. Go back to the first point. Anytime an adult has a conversation with someone who is younger, they have the opportunity to make that first impression, to make that connection with that youth.
Juvenile?
There was no reason
Handcuffed yet or not?
for this specifically.
Okay, relax. Relax.
And there's a certain level of
Hey, kiddo,
ignorance on their
is this your
part.
brother?
They just don't.
Is
They
it okay
think
if
from
you
a
sit
certain
down for a minute?
perspective. It's okay that it'll be over
You're
soon.
okay, kiddo?
You've never been held at
Are
gunpoint.
you
At
gonna step
13
out?
years old, a young lady held at gunpoint, and your response is,
Listen,
"It's
I
okay.
don't want you to get your brothers
This will be
and
over in a
sisters
minute."
upset, okay? You did
Flip
nothing
the
wrong.
script. Flip the script on the officer and let him be on the other side of those handcuffs. And let somebody else be pointing the gun at him. And tell
Exactly.
them it's okay. It's not
Yeah.
that big a
You
deal.
want to come on up, kiddo? She's talking to the police right now. Just stay right here with us, okay?
We tout policing
Slow
at the
down,
speed of
kiddo.
trust a lot
You're okay.
in the city of Grand Rapids. And after you go through those simulations and after you're in those positions, it should give the officers pause when you're
Who's
thinking
asking you
about
questions,
how
kiddo?
you're engaging, because there's a lot of education that
I'm
goes
trying to figure out what's
from
going
the
on. Here,
police
stay right here with me, kiddo.
to the population,
All right?
right, to the community. But are we really using those same lenses to say, how do I engage and how do I interact when I go out into the community? When I'm
But do you understand why
to
we're
be
here? What's
trusted,
going
how
on?
do I trust? To go back to what
Okay.
Kareem said earlier, how am I to be trusted?
And I believe me,
So-
I'm not looking to make her upset either. But she was kind of reading. That's why I'm like, keep everybody calm, and if you stay calm, she'll stay calm. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
I understand now.
okay. All right. I just want to make because I don't.
How are
like
they
getting the
expecting
kids
people to
excited.
stay
That's not what we're
calm in
trying
these
to do. We're just
situations?
trying
Like,
to
their
as safe
whole
as we
rhetoric
can
to me is
for
just,
everybody involved.
it's ridiculous. Stay calm.
Right, but it goes back to what I said earlier with Dr. DeGrye's quote in terms of traumatic slave syndrome, and I'm going to read this. What if someone severely injured you and you cannot receive the medical attention you properly heal and recover because the person that injured you kept injuring you every time you made a little progress, not to mention each time they were re-injured you. You would scream with pain and protest while they blamed you for your pain and lack of being able to recover. Then they tell you to remain calm, suck it up, and don't play the race card. So, welcome to the daily world of black and brown people who are descendants of slavery in America. And so, it is important, Grand Rapids, to come out on Thursday, March the 28th, to tell your stories and your testimonies, and say loud and clear that enough is enough, and we're not going to put up with any of this anymore. And I also will leave with this and say this: it is critically important that our allies, white folk, and others come out to speak truth to power and to stand up without fear and to stand on the side of righteousness, because one of the comments earlier was the fact that it's not about race. Absolutely correct. It's bigger than race. It's about righteousness at the end of the day. And we all know that we are in a city that promotes Christianity day in and day out, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So it's time for people of faith and our allies to stand up and say that enough is enough and righteousness has to prevail. And we have to transcend the issue of race, although we know that racism is real and it's a lie. So again, we encourage people to come out on Thursday, March 28th, 1 to 4 p.m., 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the Center for Community Transformation, NAACP office, located at 1530 Madison Avenue Southeast. Want to give a shout out to our partners, the Hispanic Center of West Michigan, the ACLU, the Immigration Rights Center, and Linc, the Pride Center, and all of the hundreds and hundreds of members of the NAACP family that exist here in the great city of Grand Rapids. So,
Any closing comments? Or go
Can
ahead,
I
Mo.
say something really
Yeah.
quickly? When you spoke about faith and when you talk about the Christian community that we live in, 1 Peter 4:12, beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you as though something strange were happening. So those words came to mind when you said that. So faith does play a role in I believe, everyone's life, whether you're religious or not. I think faith does play a part. But those words spoke to me this morning, looking at the trials that we're going through and looking at what it is that we are looking at. Everything that is worth doing is worth really applying yourself to it. And I think that that's where we are. The trials that we're facing will lead to a great truth that will come from all of this. So be an activist, share your voice, and make sure that you come out.
Yeah. I see Lionel Legrone asked a question about is it going to be live streamed on Thursday? And just want to say, I think the plan right now is to not live stream it on Thursday. I think we want to respect the privacy of the people in the room and the autonomy, and don't want people worried who have a vested interest in making sure their identity does not get publicly known very widely. And from all communities in Grand Rapids, that's not a privilege that we all have. So we're trying to respect that. So it will not be live streamed on Thursday.
Okay, fellas, this was a great night. I want to thank all of you for coming out. I know it was late. But that's we make it do what it do. So
right.
thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks,
and
guys.
thanks for everybody who tuned in tonight. Have a great evening.
See you Thursday.
All right.